Welcome to Terrascal Brick fans. Today we are going to work on two uh, sets with a bonus build. So the reason for that is because I likely will not be able to stream next weekend. So I'm going to try to get two out of the way now. That way I have YouTube set up for next week as well. Um, so we're going to try to get through these hopefully relatively quickly. Um, the first set that I have for us today, for tonight, if you're getting close to Eastern time, is the mobile recovery vehicle. And this particular set was released in 1986. It's one of the oldest ones I had personally growing up. I think there might be one or two that are just a couple years older, but that would be very close to this time period. Um, it is very much a classic space set. It doesn't necessarily have a theme within the classic space era, but as you can see, it's fairly simple, but still fairly advanced for that time period. And what you'll see about this set as we start building it is that the minifigures, the helmet is very similar to Benny's helmet from the Lego movies. Um, be they were just a little bit more elongated on the head, and they tended to crack along the chin strap. And I'll show that to you here about where it would crack here very shortly. But I guess we'll get started. This is the instructions that I had. As you can see, they're not in the greatest condition. They're kind of falling apart. They're no longer stuck together like they used to be down the middle. But we're going to go ahead and use them anyway, since I do have all the pages here. So, I'll go ahead and use that. If you're following along and building yourself, you can go to brickinstructions.com and put in again 6926, set 6926, and that'll get you to the instructions for the set. You can follow along with me. Again, this set was released in 1986. It has 140 parts with two minifigures. And again, these are classic minifigures, so you'll see some of those differences that I mentioned just a few minutes ago show up. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to move the instructions to the side. And of course, with all these sets, they always started with the minifigure builds first. Um, as you can see, with my camera set up again, I've got parts, camera over here. I have an isometric view over here, and then a top-down view for the build here. So that way you can get multiple angles. You get to see the pieces a little closer, and hopefully that's somewhat enjoyable. So we're gonna go ahead and open up the bag that has the parts for this particular build and dump it in the glass bin here. Move the bag to the side. All right. So for the minifigures, they're almost all yellow, and as you'll see, these minifigure torsos are in fairly good condition. I ended up, I had these, but I think I ended up backfilling one of them because the gold on the planet tends to wear away on these very easily. Um, it's one of the biggest issues with some of these sets, and so again, these minifigures are pretty much all yellow. They have each a helmet, each a torso, each legs that are yellow. They've got two little yellow air tanks that they also wear. There's the other set of pants. There's the other helmet. And then I think that might be it. So we have the two pairs of yellow pants. I'm going to go ahead and attach the torsos. As you can see, again, they're in fairly good condition. The gold on the planet is doing well. And so this is fairly rare for a set of this age, if it was played with, to have that gold still on it. The heads again are standard Lego heads with the solid stud and just the grin pattern. But, from that time period, they really didn't have much else on the facial expressions. until a couple years later. Do I know why they chose yellow for the suit? I do not know. I know that they have different versions of these torsos with this same symbol on it. So Benny from the movies is blue. And that is another one. I think I have a set or two that has the blue minifigure on it. So they're all blue. I'm not exactly sure why they chose yellow in this case. There are some white ones as well, I think, but that starts underneath the Futuron um, theme in the classic space era, but I'd have to verify that. And then they have ones that are black as well. So all black, all blue, all yellow, and I'm not sure if there's any other color. I know there's red. I've seen red as well in some other sets. I think it was just to break up the, you know, differences in colors for the different space uh, uh, bases and vehicles. Because they tended to match the minifigures tended to match at least one of the base colors of the item that they were building, or not building, but part of. So whatever set they were part of, they tended to be at least one of the base colors that was found in that set. Not always the majority color. In this case, yellow is not the majority color, but it's kind of like a filler. Um, One thing I did forget when attaching this guy's head is the air tank, so we'll put the air tank on there and put his head back on that. And then again, here is the old style helmet. As you can see, it's elongated here. The newer helmets are smoother. They're more sleek. This one's kind of a cylinder shape is basically what I'm getting at, versus like a round almost circle on the top of their head. This one's most like a cylinder. And the issue with these helmets from back then is that they would end up cracking right here in the center of the chin strap area. And I love the fact that in the Lego movie, they actually had that crack in there for Benny, which was, to me, a play on themselves. They knew that had that issue from back at that time period, and they placed it in the movie as a joke after the fact. And I really thought that was a nice Easter egg for those who remember those helmets from that time period. Anyway, so I'll put the helmet on this astronaut, stick him over here, and then I will do the same for the second astronaut. There may be another reason for the colors, if they had or were starting to develop different factions, but none that I know of off the top of my head. Again, they didn't really start factions until like a year or two after this. They did the Space Police, they did Futuron, they did, well, in the 1990s they came out Mtron, but prior to that it was mostly Futuron, Blacktron. It was a Tron series basically is what it come down to. Most of them had a Tron ending. Yeah, I do agree. The yellow does look good with the blue, and it can contrast fairly nicely. And you'll see in this build that is the case as there as we make this. I think it looks fairly good for this set. So those are the two minifigures, and this build is broken up into multiple like different parts. So it starts at one, in various locations. It starts at one uh, there and then here, and I think that's because that these are each different sections of the vehicle that could potentially come apart. I'm having a hard time remembering because it's been so long since I've built this. I did have to backfill a number of pieces because of parts missing, but not a lot, just a few, and due to some damage, from age and whatnot. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and go start with the step one on that first page then. And that calls for a this tends to be used as a vehicle base, um, but in this case they actually defined it as a blue bracket, 8x2 by 1 1/3. Um, it is often used as a vehicle base though in a lot of these early sets. Um, So that is where this one starts, and that's basically, again, step one is all that is. Another thing to point out that I've pointed out in some of my past videos is that these steps are not as defined as current um, Lego instructions have them, in that it doesn't list the pieces that are for each step, and the how what they are and what the number of them are that are being added, and it doesn't even highlight like what's changed in between each steps. You have to look at that, compare that yourself, and it's basically a spot the difference sort of thing in between each of these steps. So these steps tend to be more numerous, but also fairly simple for that reason. So to eliminate some of the confusion in between some of these steps, they made it, only 4 or 5 pieces get added at a time typically in between these steps, whereas nowadays some of the larger sets, like the UCS sets or whatever, you can have 20 plus pieces being added in a single step. But still, even with that, the Millennium Falcon, some of the larger UCS sets have 1,000 plus steps to them with that even. So the builds just become more complicated over time. But back in this time period, they were a little bit more simple. And so that's what we're dealing with here. All right, so we have that as step one again. Step two is basically adding two 2x2 by 1 inverted slopes, with the slope being a 1/2. I, for some reason, have a hair on this plate. It's bothering me. Oh well, I'll blow it off real quick. There we go. All right, I'm gonna cut that out of the video probably for YouTube, but sorry about that. All right. So yeah, there's two of these, 2x2 by 1 inverted slopes. So I'm gonna find the second one somewhere. There it is in this pile. Okay. And then it also adds in a 1x4 by 1 Technic brick with 3 holes. Now, Technic was newer to this time period. They used these bricks fairly sporadically throughout some of these early sets, especially on the space ones. They typically used them mostly on the space ones. Most of your classic city sets, of course, they wouldn't have any of that in Pirates or any of the other themes, but these space ones tended to have a little bit of these Technic pieces because, one, they kind of looked a little futuristic for that time period. And the Technic theme really wasn't established all that much prior. It was there, but it wasn't as big as it is now, and in fact, we're going to end up doing a Technic set for the bonus build from 1994, so we'll get to that. But this is our first Technic piece that we've had in any of the sets we've built so far. So in step two, basically, they add this 1x4 Technic brick to the back of that bracket, and then on the front of the bracket, they place the two inverted slopes like so on either side of the front portion of this bracket. That's like a 2x3 section there, and that is step two. Step three then adds in 3 of these 2x2 black plates with axle hole, the round black plates with axle hole, and there are 3 of them, as well as a wedge plate, a 4x3 wedge plate with a 1x2 cutout out of it, and that one's blue. So we have these 3 black and 1 blue piece, and they get added again to the bottom of this as well, to keep those inverted slopes in place. They get added there, and then this wedge plate is added on the back end here. Step 4, they flip it over, and we basically get the only 2 pieces that get added in step 4 look to be 1x3 inverted slope, 1x3 by 1 inverted slopes. So these are going to be skinnier and slightly longer than the 2x2s, obviously. Here's one, and that's blue as well. And here's the second one. And that is all that gets added in step 4. So we'll place those on here. Like so. Step 5 adds in 2 wings. And those wings are blue as well. So I'll get the little descriptions here in a second. So, oops, not that wing. It is this wing. And the actual dimensions of that wing are, let's see here. So it's a blue wedge plate 8x4, and then this is a wing right because it obviously angles to the right, and this is a wing left. And this also mentions that it's without the underside notches. So something that they did not do earlier in the Lego time period is a lot of these wedge plates that had an angle on them, they did not have notches along the angled edge. They do nowadays typically, because then what you can do is if you've got a plate like this, like what's this, light gray base plate that we have right here, if you wanted to, you could press this wing or this wedge plate down fully on it and it would stay level. You cannot do that with these though, because they do not have the notches in them along that angle section. So if I were to attempt to try to push this wing down on this plate, it would not sit flush with the plate on this side. It would be angled up for that reason. So one of the interesting tidbits from the wedge plates from back then is that they didn't start adding the notches until later. But anyway, these get added in step 5 right here on either side to start forming the, I'm guessing the cockpit of the spacecraft. Step 6 adds in some light gray 1x1 plates modified with I think these are headlight holders, thin, and I'll describe that more in detail here in a second. We also have a 1x4x1 blue brick. We have 2 1x3x1 slopes. So instead of the inverted slope, which is the opposite of this, this is a regular slope, which gives you the smooth surface going down versus the smooth surface being on the underside. I'm trying to find the second one now. Let's see here. There it is. Okay. And then lastly, it looks like there is a 1x2 tile that has a special buttons on it, like 4 buttons and a little design. Let's see if we can find that. So similar to this, but not that obviously because it doesn't have the design on it. So I'm trying to find the one with the design on it. Let's see. One of the other things to sets from here we go. Sets from this era is that they didn't split, and I don't think I've mentioned this in any of the previous builds, is they didn't split these pieces into separate bags based upon, bag 1, bag 2, bag 3 like they do today. They came all in one bag. So it did become a little harder to find pieces, especially on very large sets. And you'll see that here when we go to do some of our larger ones, that they're not separated by bags. So it's a lot harder to find the pieces because you're looking through all the pieces within that whole build versus, when you first get it nowadays out of a box, it is separated by steps or by bags. And then, but of course, once you've built it once and you get rid of the bags, well, then you're back to the same thing as what existed earlier. So just another little thing for the initial build. At least there's a slight difference, but after you built it once, you kind of lose that advantage. Back to step 6. What we have here for these headlights, I'm trying to find them. Here we go. So light gray plate modified, with light attachment thin ring. So in one of my previous builds, I think we had a thin U-clip, but we had a thick ringed light attachment. In this case, this is actually a thin ringed one. Again, they didn't start moving until the thicker ring till slightly later. So this was fairly common at this point in time, is that they would have these really thin rings. The lights would be very close together, or whatever you attach to these would be very close together as a result. They get added to the front here. The 1x4x1 blue brick is added here on the back of the vehicle, or at least this portion of it. Then the 1x3x1 slopes are added to either side of that 1x4 brick. And then lastly, the panel, or the tile with the design on it, is added with the buttons on the right side, and that is placed there. So that is step 6. Step 7 now adds in some more slopes, an inverted slope, both of the regular and the inverted kind, as well as some fence latticing. First, we will start with the 2 1x2x1 blue slopes. There's 2 of those there. And then we have a 2x3x1 inverted slope. That is this one here. So you see it's a 2x3 inverted slope. And then the 1x4x1 fence lattices, which I always found interesting that that's what they referred to these as, but that is the case. So the lattice structure was very, very prominent in the early Lego days as a fence or border in some cases. They would usually do them in these 1x4x1 sections, or they would be 1x4x2 with the lattice in the center of the 1x4 base. So that is typically how you would find those from that. And then of course they came in multiple colors, but yeah, that is the definition of these pieces. And also, interestingly enough, something else to mention, Lego did not seem to brand these pieces for some reason. So a lot of the other pieces, if you look underneath them or look in specific areas, you can find Lego's logo, on that piece to verify 100% that that piece is a Lego piece. For some reason, these lattices were not set up that way until later. These very early lattices, especially those with the solid studs, or the solid stud center points underneath, basically did not have the Lego logo anywhere on them, but they certainly are a Lego piece. And there are a couple other bricks that are like that. At some point, if we ever really go to a really old house build that used to use the they're like 3x4 3x4x1 slopes pieces that they would put on the roof of houses. A lot of those, I think, also did not have the Lego branding on them at first. But yeah, so I don't know if it was just because it was more difficult back then to get it on this particular piece or not. Not entirely sure. Somebody else understands that, certainly let us know. All right, so step 7, the lattice fencing goes on either side of the control tile there in the center. And then the 2 1x2x1 slopes are added to either side of the back. And then the 2x3 inverted slope is added onto between those and facing back as well. And that is step 7. So step 7, we're starting to see the basically the formation of the front of the vehicles, the cockpit, basically. So step 8. So step 8 adds in a 2x4x1 slope brick. And that is that one there. It also adds in 2 1x4 blue plates. There's 1, There's two. And again, I want to mention, I think in the last build we mentioned it, that these plates had the solid circular sections in the center on the underneath portion of the plate. Later plates, starting in about 1994, had the ones that started getting the hollow center circle stud portions of them in there. And then Lego did that to start saving on plastic, things along that nature. But uh, these older sets for sure had the solid center understuds. It wasn't until like about 1992, 1994 that they started mixing in these new ones, and then they, you get some sets with both, you get some sets with just one type. It all depended. But just wanted to. Does the control board all have the control to the whole ship? I think so. The only reason I'm going to say this, I don't remember there being another control board anywhere in this build, but there might be. It's been so long since I've done this one. Mostly again because I was missing pieces to it, so I have never was able to fully build it a lot. I think very early on, this was one of the ones I ended up inheriting from some friends, and I'm pretty sure it came with some missing pieces when I first got it, so I never was able to fully build the set. But I would think that yes, in this case, this for these minifigure astronauts, that is probably the center location for the controls. So we'll see. We'll see if there's any additional ones. Back to step 8, the 2x4 slope by 1 slope piece goes on the front. And then these two 1x4 plates, blue plates, are snapped onto one another and then placed on top of those 1x2x1 slopes and across the 2x3 inverted slope to keep those in place. Now that is step 8. Step 9 now adds in these little so these are technically called minifigure cups, utensils, or they're part of the minifigure utensil part type as a goblet. But these pieces are often used as like exhaust vents for race cars from that era. Even up till today, they're used for things along that nature. They could be used as a small little trophy, as a goblet for drinking. This particular piece had lots of different functions, which made it unique. And again, this is the light gray color. The light gray color went out of commission later in the mid 2000s, and became the light bluish gray color. But a lot of these sets from before then all have this light gray color and then dark gray. So light gray and dark gray. And I've already talked about the differences in those colors in previous videos. But yeah, original multi-tool. Kind of. Very much so. Um, it was definitely a piece that was used uniquely in certain aspects. There are a number of others that are kind of like this that are useful as multiple items. Such, for example, again, I think in another build we talked about this. This was used as a front grill on that stunt copter truck, but this is technically considered a ladder for the minifigures. So you can have something that's like a ladder versus um, grill or and that's what's so enjoyable about Lego is that their pieces can be used for lots of different things, and in lots of cases their purpose is they change some of the purposes in some of these builds that are very um interesting and unique. Like, for example, if you look at the bonsai tree from the garden set types, they use the little frogs as the flowers for the bonsai tree. And they were little pink frogs, and they would use them as the flowers. And you just find some really interesting ways to use pieces to come across. And it's like anything with art and coloring and sculpting and whatnot. there's a lot of different things you can use for multiple purposes. I'm getting off topic. So back to step 9, we have these 2 light gray utensil goblets, and then on top of that we have these 2 black, and these are considered loudspeakers. Uh, at least the description on BrinkLink is what they're called, and I usually found them to be, in a lot of my racing sets, those would be like the announcement speakers above the announcer's podium and stuff like that. But in this case, these actually have a secondary name of called the space positioning rockets. So I can imagine that in this case, uh, these would be your small rockets that just shoot air in different directions to position the vehicle very carefully in space. Even nowadays, in the real world, they use very similar little small jet boosters to be able to move the shuttle or the space station around slightly one direction or another and multiple directions without using the main thrusters. And so that's basically what these were designed for this particular set. And they end up going on the back here of this 2x3 inverted slope, like so. And then the goblets are placed on the front of these light attachments. Now, one of the things that made this light attachment also a problem in some cases is that without having that thick ring, the piece doesn't stick as well to it like it should. So these will fall off very easily. When they thickened the ring, they helped with some of that depth on the stud portion, and were able to keep the pieces a little bit firmer in place. So that is step 9. Step 10 adds in the windscreen, and I love the color of this windscreen. This is one of the more unique colors. It is a yellow, obviously trans yellow, 4 by, I'm gonna say 6. Yeah, 6 by 4 by 2 canopy with the trans yellow, and then it uses a 1 by 4 blue hinge plate to attach to it to be able to place the minifigure inside of the ship. So in this particular case, this gets placed on top of the 2 1 by 4 plates that we put on earlier. And then the last portion in step 10 is the addition of these trans red 1 by 1 round cones. That is what those are called. I found one. There's the other one. And so these get placed on the front of the utensil goblet, the goblet utensil, like so. That one, of course, fell off because it's very loose. There we go. And there we have step 10 completed, and we'll put the minifigure inside like they also show on that step. So we'll place one of them inside there. And there we are. So this appears to be one section of the vehicle. So I guess I didn't remember that this vehicle, came apart in a couple pieces. So this could go around on its own, and I just busted it up again. This could fly around on its own, separate of the landing vehicle, as such. So we'll put that. Actually, we'll put that in front of the 3D or the isometric view for right now, out of the way. And so that completed the initial cockpit of the vehicle as a initial stage to the build. The second stage starts building the wheelbase, and again starts at step 1 for that wheelbase. And in this case, it starts off with a 1 by 4 blue plate, and then two 2 by 8 blue plates. And they're spaced. It looks like from the drawing, there's the 2x8 plates are spaced one stud apart, and the 1x4 plate is spaced two studs from that and centered. At least according to the drawing, it looks that way. One, you start building with Lego from back in that time period, well, and even today, you start to understand the gaps. You can start to guess what those gaps are without actually seeing the studs in between. A lot of times, because you get familiarized with the builds. Um, on top of that, you also get familiarized with um, the not the type of pieces. Where was I going with that? It was something else. Oh, if it comes back to me, I'll have to mention it. Um, it was related to spacing and gaps on these builds, but if I can think of it again, I'll mention it. All right, step one's basically just the base there. The step two adds in some more Technic bricks. So we have here a another Technic brick type. So this is a 1x12x1 Technic brick with 11 holes. There's always usually one less hole than there is studs on these bricks. So we have two of those of the blue variety, and then two 1x6x1 Technic bricks with 5 holes in them. And these basically form the base of the vehicle and are placed on the plates like so to keep them in place. And again, this 1x4 is placed two spaces, two studs away from the 2x8s. And then there's a one stud gap in between. And that is now step two. Is it the side holes that make them Technic? Yes. Um, yes, there are Technic bricks that don't, or not Technic bricks. There are Technic pieces that don't have side holes, but they're Technic in that for a couple of reasons. One is these holes are all specific sized to be able to allow an axle to go through them. For if that's the type of wheelbase or piece that ends up going through, the axle's made to go slide all the way through them. If need be, it's a specific size. The holes are also designed for pins, for Technic pins, to be able to allow you to connect other pieces to them, and that's actually how the wheels, I think, are connected to this base, and you'll see that here in a little bit. But yeah, for bricks, the holes are basically what make them Technic. If there's anything related to a brick that might be modified or something that might be modified with a hole in it like this that is designed for these pins for those axles, then it's also usually considered a Technic piece. And you'll see more of that when we go to do the Technic build after this one. So that completes step two. Step three now adds in the Technic pins that I was referring to, as well as a few other pieces. So we have these two yellow 1x1 round bricks, and then we have two light gray 2x2x1 round bricks with an axle hole in the center. Now, even though the axle hole in the center is mentioned there, and that an axle can actually go into that, the at least Bricklink doesn't describe these as Technic pieces, and I can understand why. They were used a lot initially without the axle hole. They came without the axle hole initially, and they were solid, and so they were just basically 2x2x1 round bricks, and so it stuck with that name, even though they added an axle hole in later, which makes them compatible with Technic pieces, but in this case, they don't actually have a Technic name, at least in Bricklink. So it kind of also depends upon the origin of where some of these pieces came from. And then on top of that, we have 4 of these, and I'm going to have to ensure I get this right. These are the light gray Technic pins. In this case, it's an axle, one length, so 1L always usually means one length, what typically one stud or one brick size in length, with pin without friction ridges with round hole. So I know that seems to be a mouthful, but basically what it is you have, this is the pin that doesn't have any friction ridges on it. So when this side of a Technic pin is placed within a Technic brick, it spins freely. It'll spin very easily and freely. The 1L, axle 1L, is basically meaning that it's shaped in the form of an axle part. And so as you can see, this it would match up with this I'm kind of off the screen here. It matches up with this brick with the axle in the center hole, because that axle can actually go into the center of that brick and then becomes, you could turn it. It basically is holding that pin in place. Not so on the other side. Again, the other side is frictionless. Well, we all know it's not technically frictionless, but no friction in that. It is able to move freely. They make other pins, and again, we'll see that in the Technic build, that actually are friction, or they offer friction, so they're not made to move. Others are not made to move very well, so they're partial friction. And Technic has a whole bunch of different variety of these items, of axles, of these pins, but that's what makes those Technic builds so interesting, is because they use a lot of gearing, things along that nature, that it's unique. It's not just about play, it's also about function, if that makes sense. But anyway, so we have 4 of these light gray pins with 1/2 frictionless and 1/2 of the axle, one length. And there's the 4th one. The 2 1x1 round yellow bricks are placed on either side of the 1x4 plate, like so. And then these 2x2x1 round bricks with an axle hole in the center are placed in the middle of the 1x12 Technic bricks, there and here. So 1 gap on the end, or 1 stud off the end, 2 stud gap in the middle. And then lastly, these pins, they're placed. So here's where it gets interesting on some of these instruction books. A lot of times, obviously, even modern day, the modern day instructions now, you have to count the number of holes or number of spaces off to try to make sure you get the position of these pins correct. But with these particular instructions, it's hard to see sometimes the other side. So they're typically showing the instruction at an angle. Let's see if I can get the angle right of the instruction on what this would look like here. So it kind of would look like this on the instruction booklet. And so if there's pins on the back here or on the other side, they're kind of hard to see. So either you guess as to their position because symmetry, they're symmetrical on both sides, or you just have to be really careful about, spotting those differences like we mentioned before. So we will add those pins in the correct spot. So in this pin is off 1 hole from the back side, and as you can see, it spins freely with my hand. So again, that frictionless part is snapped into those holes, those Technic holes. The other one for the left side gets placed right in the first hole of the 1x12 Technic brick, and then it's the exact same on the mirror. On the other side is mirrored. So in this case, the pins are placed all in the same location on both sides, left and right of the vehicle base. So it's just that's how it shows in step 3. Step 4 starts adding in a few more bricks. We have a 2x8 by 1 blue brick, a 2 more 1x2x1 blue slopes, and then another Technic brick. In this case, it's a 1x8 by 1 Technic brick with 7 holes. Again, the holes are always almost always 1 less than what the number of studs in length it is. So this Technic brick gets placed as a cross bracer on the back of the base like so. And then this 2x8 by 1 blue brick is placed in this almost in the center across the 4 different Technic bricks to keep them braced. And then lastly, these 2 1x2 by 1 inverted bricks, or I'm sorry, not inverted, slopes, are placed on either side to keep those yellow round bricks in place. And that is now step, and again, I'll show it from the side. So this is what our base looks like so far. And this is, that was step 4. We're going to go on to step 5 of the base. All right, step 5. So step 5 looks like 4 additional pieces. We have a 2x2 blue plate. We have a 2x2 blue tile with a yellow arrow on it. We have 2 1x2 blue tiles as well. And that makes up the pieces for step 5. So this 2x2 blue plate is placed in the middle of that 2x8 brick in the center of the vehicle. Same thing for the blue arrow, the 2x2 tile with the not blue arrow, be yellow arrow, but a blue tile is placed next to that 2x2 plate with the arrow facing towards the front of the vehicle. And then we have these 2 1x2 blue tiles that are placed on either side of that blue tile with the yellow arrow on it. That is step 5. Step 6 adds in 2 1x2 blue plates. There's 1. There's 2. And then we also have, so this is where it gets a little tricky. Because in a lot of cases, these sets, the instructions, are built mostly symmetrical, meaning when you build something on one side in these early sets that typically is also built on the same side in the same step. That is not going to be the case with this step. And so that can sometimes lead to confusion, but I understand why they do it, because otherwise it even makes it harder to see. Well, and you'll see here in a second, in the step after, a brick blocks that other brick, and so you would not even know it was there or what kind of brick it was, or it was just really hard to tell. So they'll place that brick ahead of a step before they'll do the symmetrical side. It's just, some of the things I've noticed growing up with some of these instructions, some of the different strategies they used to try to ensure that the build was made accurate, or was easier for people to follow along. Back to the build, we also have another 1x2 blue tile. And then we have a 1x2 by 1 blue slope. And here's where I was referring to this not being symmetrical here in a second. So this 1x2 blue tile is placed in front of the blue arrow, the blue tile with the yellow arrow. Keep calling it the blue arrow. I really need to slow down maybe when I'm speaking. These 2 1x2 blue plates are snapped together on top of one another and then placed in front of that 1x2 blue tile. And then this 1x2 by 1 blue slope is placed on the right side. And by right side, I mean the right side of the vehicle. So if this is the front, it's back, right side. That 1x2 is placed on the right side only in this step. The next step, they'll add in the second one, but not before they also place another brick between, which is another reason why they do this. Anyway, so that completes step 6. Step 7 now adds in another 2x3 by 1 blue inverted slope, as well as a 2x3 by 1 blue brick, and then another 1x2 by 1 blue slope. And so this 2x3 blue brick is placed here across the that 2x2 light gray round brick with the axle in the center. And now you can see kind of why they did that 1x2 by 1 blue slope in the previous step, because at this angle, and I'll try to get the angle at which it shows as the instructions almost. At this angle, it's really hard to tell that that's a sloped piece without really paying attention. Really looking hard at that. And because that can be easily missed, they obviously did that in the previous step. So just following through to show again why they didn't do it symmetrical this time. It was because of the way the instructions are viewed. They typically didn't do a lot of flipping and rotating like they do in modern day instructions to show all the different sides of stuff, to ensure pieces aren't missed, and split the steps up that way. Again, they kept it simpler but with more steps. Less pieces per step, though. The 1x2 by 1 blue slope is then placed on the other side of that 2x3 blue brick, which then now makes the build symmetrical again. And then this 2x3 by 1 blue inverted slope is placed on the front there. That concludes step 7. Step 8 now adds in a few more, looks like some more tiles. So we have a 1x2 blue tile again. We have a 2x2 blue tile, not with an arrow though, so I need to make sure I get that right because we have a second one. There should be a blank one in here somewhere. Just a plain blue tile, no arrow. And let's see if I can find it. I always had an issue. There it is. I always had an issue trying to find these pieces when they're, because a lot of times when you're building, you have to look for both sides, and you have to know what those kind of represent, as you're moving pieces around, because they can be facing up, they can be facing upside down, and they look very different from one to the other. But the side that you see on the build is the top. So if it's not facing that direction, it's a lot harder to find in those in a pile of Lego, or in the bins or whatever you're using to pull the Lego from. Anyway, the 2x2 blue tiles placed there to keep the 2x3 inverted slope in place. Then there is a 1x2 blue tile placed next to that. There is also a 1x4 blue plate, as well as a 1x2 blue plate. And then lastly, it looks like these are light gray brackets again, but in a different, so these, there are 2 of these. These are considered light gray brackets, 3x2 by 2x2 inverted, and in parentheses it says space seat. That is because these particular pieces were heavily used in the classic space era, either as seats or as locations where the rockets would go. Like if they ended up putting larger rockets on the back of the vehicle or on the back of the spaceship, because these are one is the horizontal section of the Lego, the other is the vertical section of the Lego. This could be placed on a plate, and then the back could be used as the rocket side. And so the engine or whatever it is that was used for the build could be placed on the back there. So that is typically why these brackets were heavily used in the space, in the classic space theme. The 1x4 blue plate is placed across those 2 1x2 blue slopes from the previous steps. The 1x2 blue plate is placed between that and the 1x2 blue tile. And then lastly, for step 8, these space seats, as they're called, are placed on either side of the vehicle. Symmetrical, again, like so. And that will finish step 8. Step 9 adds in another 2x2 blue tile with yellow arrow. And actually, that might be... Oh, no. I see it. I almost missed that. In addition to that, there is a 2x3 blue plate and two 1x1 blue plates. There we are. This 2x3 blue plate is placed here in the center of the vehicle. And if you'll notice, there is now a lip here with that tile beneath the blue plate. And that is where the top of this cab over here is going to slide into place there, and and stay in place while on the vehicle base. And then of course you slide it out and you can fly around with it. So this portion was meant to fly. This portion is meant to be the ground portion of the base. So yeah, it was neat how they used these tiles to pinch pieces basically to slide them into place, to keep them in place, but not permanently, obviously. So you can easily move them in and out, play with them that way. This other arrow is faced in the opposite direction of the previous arrow at the front of the vehicle. So this arrow is now facing, if we're looking at this is the front, this is the back. This arrow is now facing the back, whereas the previous arrow was facing the front. And then these two 1x1 blue plates are placed on either side of that 2x3 blue plate. That completes step 9. Step 10 now adds in these very large wheels, and I'll get to those as a descriptor here in a second, as well as a 1x4 blue plate, 2 trans red 1x1 round bricks, and then lastly a 2x2 by 1 blue brick modified with a pin. Oh, and I just realized this piece is damaged. So I'm going to have to find a different piece for this. I think I'll be able to get it to work for now. But I am going to have to replace this. I can't believe I missed that before. I'm usually not, I usually pay very good attention to things like this, especially on older pins, because this is what happened. They would tend to get crushed. They get bent. You can see that there's, let's see if I can bring it closer. There we go. You can see there's damage to that pin. This bottom portion here is crushed inward. I still think it'll hold, but it won't hold very well. So again, I'll just have to find a different brick in this case. So that's going to be a rare thing, I guarantee you, on my builds. Is I've looked through these sets multiple times, and yeah, I'm not perfect. I'll miss one or two pieces every once in a while. Like I missed that the Forestman's torso in the last in the Crusader's cart that had cracks down in the center of it. So I now have 2 bricks I still need to replace in 2 builds that we currently have, but not a huge deal. It's fairly simple to do, and I know I have extras of these, so it's not really a problem. Anyway, this 2x2 blue brick with a modified with a pin in the center is placed there. And now I'm thinking, because I haven't built this in forever, that I might have this wrong, and that canopy actually goes in the front here, and that something else slides in the back here. So I'm not surprised. Again, I never did have all the pieces to this set originally. This is the first time I think I will have it built completely in its life cycle, and so I don't remember this one as much unless I look at the end picture, which I just should have been doing this whole time. But it tends to miss things. Yeah, it looks like there's a back section of the vehicle. Looking at the picture of it now, it looks like there's a back section of the vehicle that slides on the back. So we have 2 locations where that slides. So the purpose then of this pin would be to snap into the back portion of this cockpit and hold that in place while the vehicle's running around on its wheels. But the fact that it's only held by 1 pin along and slid along these tiles means it's fairly easy to also snap off and move around. So looking at the picture, this is the front. This is, something else slides in the back here. So I had that backwards, but the two trans red 1x1 round bricks are placed on either side of that 2x2x1 blue brick that was modified. And then the 1x4 blue plates placed on top of those to keep those two round, trans red round bricks in place. And then the last portion of step 10 is the wheels. And I held them off to last here for this step for a particular reason. This actually would come in two pieces. The tire would be by itself, and then the center portion would be the what's called a light gray wheel with split axle hole. Not given a specific size. That was a generic thing for early Technic sets. And as you can see, they had a tendency, these early Technic or wheels with the split axle hole had a very large tendency of cracking right down the side of one of these spots. And it was because of the pressure, not only the pressure that the tire puts on the the wheel when it's placed on that that wheel, when the tire's placed on that wheel, the pressure it puts on the outside, but then when an axle or something is slid down the center, then the pressure from that axle also pushes out against these two sides and it would lead to this cracking. Very common, very, very common for these. They shored these up later on. They do not crack as much, in the modern day use of these is this very similar wheel. And the reason is because they've done a better job with the center in keeping that in place, and they don't have as much pressure put on the tires to the center to cause that cracking. So they do a lot better now. They fixed that pretty much for modern day builds, but almost every single one of these from, I would say, from the mid 1990s earlier, they would almost always end up cracking um, because of the stress that's on that center portion. And so it was always usually best to just keep the wheel with the axle in the tire once you've had it in there, not to remove it, because once you removed it, it falls apart. So usually, it still works. It's just uh, it's got that crack in there, and it may not hold as tightly sometimes, depending upon how large that crack is. It may not hold as tightly to the axle either. So we'll see how well these do. Yes, these are very giant tires. That's what makes this set so interesting and unique for this time period. Is typically a lot of times that they did smaller tire things. This one was interesting in that for some reason they decided to go with large tires on a space, a classic space set. But that kind of makes sense, I guess, if you're transiting space planets or whatnot, very rocky outcrops or whatnot. They stuck very large wheels on a lot of the spacecraft roving around on some of the planets we have now. So yeah, that makes sense as to why they placed large tires on this particular vehicle. And at least that's what I like to think. So again, these tires are placed on these pins on that one L side, the one axle L side, and they're placed. They just slide in place, like so. And some of them are sliding on easier than others, which does tell me that some of these cracks are definitely playing a little bit of a role. So this one took a little effort to push on, and you can see there are no cracks whatsoever on this wheelbase. There is one on that one, and that one slid very easily. More than likely, I'll probably end up replacing that center axle piece because at some point it will fall completely apart. But for now, it works. And to be honest, this set currently looks like a tractor, doesn't it? It basically has the very same form factor of like a John Deere tractor or something along that nature, from farming. So At this point in time, it doesn't look very spacey as much, does it? That completes. Yeah, it is a tractor. Basically, almost. Only with it'll have jet engines on the back, so that'll be interesting. Uh, so that completes step 10. We're now moving on to, I think now what we are going to get to is the, yes, so the next portion of the vehicle that slides on the back. So it looks like that's what they did with these instructions. They split these instructions up based upon each section of this vehicle. So you have the cockpit section, the wheelbase section, and then there's like a almost like, I would say it's like a little science center is what slides on the back, a little mobile science center, and that's what this is this vehicle is called, the mobile recovery vehicle. Um, More than so it looks like it has multifunction basically. Um, anyway, so we're now going to finish with the last section of this vehicle. So now I'm going to go ahead and place, actually what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to head and go take this cockpit, and I'm going to go ahead and slide it on here, snap it in place. If this pin will let me, because remember this pin was damaged. Oh, there we go. Okay, I managed to get it on. All right, very nice. Might not stay on. Again, I'll have to replace that brick later. Maybe I'll have to have you guys remind me. But there is the vehicle currently. Now it doesn't look so much like a tractor, does it? It looks a little bit more space themed, obviously. Yeah, yeah. So we're getting there, is basically what it comes down to. All right, let's finish this build so we can move on to the Technic set, so we can, not spend too long here on this stream. The last vehicle section, step 1 of that, basically starts off with a 4x8 blue plate, and it is placed in the instructions upside down, basically like so. The step 2 just adds in a 2x6 blue plate that is then placed in the center of that 4x8 plate, like so. There is then 4 of these 2x2 black plates, round back black plates with axle hole in the center. So again, so you can see the little plus. I always like to refer to it as a little plus sign. But that's basically the form factor of the axles. And we don't have any axles in this set. You'll see it in the next set, an actual axle that are made to like slide through these sections. But you saw it with that pin on the wheelbase. Very similar shape, only the axles are, various sizes. They could be 2L, 3L, all the way up to, goodness, I don't know what the largest one is, but I know there's one that's basically a full base plate's length, and that could be like 32L, or I think this base plate might be even a 40. I'd have to look again. They make some really long axles for some various reasons, but I was getting off topic again. These two by two round black plates with axle hole are placed together like so, with 2 on one and 2 on the other, and then those are placed on the left. Well, basically from this top down view, on the left side and the right side of that base. And keeping it upside down, in step 4, they now add in 2 by 2 round black bricks with a center axle hole. So almost the height of these. So 3 of these. So that was always the thing. 3 plates always makes up 1 brick, if you think about it that way. So the width of a plate is, a brick is 3 of those. That is how that they've always managed to work it. And that makes things very unique and easy as well to be able to match when getting things to level. If you have to build across something or whatnot, you count the plates. You can always make it match to whatever level you have on the other side if you need to for that reason. Anyway, so these 2 by 2 round bricks, black bricks, are placed on either side of that 4x8 blue plate. And that is step 4. Again, these steps are very simple for this reason of the instructions just were made to not be as confusing back then. Step 5 flips this over, and we see a 2x2 light gray brick modified with a pinhole. So, matching exactly the same as that blue one we used on the wheelbase. This one is a light gray version of that. That is placed here on the front. If we consider the front, the left side here from the top down view. And that, again, is all step 5 is. These are very simple, easy steps. Step 6, and the only reason they're taking us this long, I would say, is because I'm I get off topic. I'm talking about different pieces and parts and different things. If I didn't have to do that, I mean, this build would take very little time. But I like breaking these things out. Hopefully you do too. In hearing, some of the different things, pieces of knowledge from the past that I've gotten from my personal experiences. But anyway, step 6 basically adds in 2 1x3x1 inverted blue slopes. And they are placed here next to that 2x2 light gray brick with the pinhole. And then in addition to that, in step 6, there is a 2x2 blue plate that is placed in the center of that to make it, again, level. So now we're level all the way across that top portion of the inverted bricks. Step 7 adds in 2 small wing plates. So we have here step 7. These are 4x4 wing plates, blue, and there's a right and a left. Again, you can always tell based upon the slant. The slant's to the right, that's a right. The slant's to the left, it's left. And then again, these are without the stud notches that we talked about earlier on those other wings. So in this case, these are just much shorter wings, same width, but much shorter. And they get placed on top of this. Oh, not there. I gotta make sure I get it at the right location. They're placed with 2, and still didn't get it in the right location because it's centered. There we are. All right. So this 2x2 corner is placed on this 2x2 section of the blue plate along with the blue wedge of each side. And so there we are. That is the wings for step 7. Step 8 adds in a 2x3 blue plate and 2 1x2 blue slopes. 2 1x2x1 blue slopes. The 2x3 blue plate is placed on the front of the vehicle again there with 1 stud hanging off. And then the 2 1x2 blue bricks are placed on either side of these wings, left and right wing, with the slope facing inward. And that is it for step 8. Step 9 adds in another 1x2 blue tile. There it is. So 1x2 blue tile. A 2x2x1 round blue brick with axle hole again in the center. And then 2 1x1x1 blue bricks. The 2 1x1s get placed on the top of the slopes, like so. And then the 2x2x1 round blue brick is placed on the 2x3 plate there. And then the 1x2 blue tile is placed on the very front edge of that 2x3 plate that was placed in the previous step. That is step 9. Step 10 now adds in 2 1x1 blue plates, as well as 2 1x1 blue plates modified with a U-clip thin. And again, I know that's a mouthful, and we're going to go over this again like we have in some of the previous builds. But I made sure these matched 100% to the part type. So early versions, early Legos back in the late 80s and even some aspects of partial the early 90s, they, similar to those thin light attachments that were at the front of the cockpit, this used a U-clip to snap things onto it, but it was very thin, and that's why it's specifically labeled that way on Bricklink, because this is a very thin clip, and they had a tendency to snap very easily as a result of the fact that they didn't have a lot of strength on the clip section. So Lego eventually modified these, and multiple times. It wasn't just once. I think there's about 3 different versions of these U clips, but in the last 2 versions, in the latter 2 versions, they thickened that U portion up, so less likely to snap. Still possible. Not going to say it's not possible. Enough force on anything will make anything snap, but less likely. So, but when I got these parts for this build, I made sure I kept to the original part type for accuracy. So, and then this build, oh, I got that backwards. So basically on this step 10, the U-clip is placed underneath the 1x1 blue plate, and then that is then placed on top of the 1x1 blue brick on either side. And so in this case, I've got to actually separate that because I had that backwards. Place that on top like so, and place that on the side over here. There we are. Okay. And then step 10 also had a 1x2 blue brick, as well as 2 1x1 blue bricks with headlight. Again, that is just the description of what it is on Bricklink, because basically these are used on a lot of builds, especially early cars, as they would attach the trans-clear lights to them. And so this would typically be referred to as a headlight for that reason, because that is what their primary purpose was basically. Nowadays, they're used for all different sort of things. But in this case, they are placed with the headlights attachment section facing in towards the vehicle, and then the 1x2 blue brick is placed on their outside towards the front. And that is step 10. Step 11 now adds in another control panel. So you did ask before if there was another control panel for this vehicle. And while technically this doesn't have any buttons on it, if you could see, there's no buttons or anything on this. This has a lot of studs for attaching different controls on it if you wanted to. So this is basically referred to as a light gray minifigure utensil control panel. That is the official name for this particular brick. And it is basically snapped onto the front of those 2 headlights like so, with the control portion of it facing down. So yes, there is technically another control on this vehicle, but it's not a tile control, or what's the word I'm really looking for? It's not drawn on. It's not a visual control. It's an actual, again, this one was more like function versus visual buttons or design. Yeah, that was probably the better word for it, design. On top of that, for step 11, we also have a black walkie-talkie, a black minifigure utensil walkie-talkie, and a black minifigure utensil wrench. And I don't know if there's a specific size for that, because I know they make different wrenches. Yeah, so it's basically referred to as a tool spanner wrench screwdriver. So you have to remember that Lego was originally designed, still is, based out of Denmark. Lego is a Denmark company, and so being European, they refer to wrenches over there in Europe as spanners. And so therefore, it ends up with that description in it, as well as wrench for us other types on the American side of things, on the North American side of the continent, because we like to do things different. So we call it a wrench. And then at least the walkie-talkie is referred to the same on either side of the ocean, so it doesn't really matter in that case. But yeah, so the walkie-talkie, which has as you notice, has a little bar here on it, that gets snapped onto that U-clip there on the right side of the vehicle, and it also fits. It would fit again a minifigure's hand. So whenever it refers to anything as a minifigure utensil, it always means that it has the potential to be able to snap onto a minifigure hand. So that is true across the board for anything that's labeled minifigure utensil. In that subcategory, it's for that reason. It means it can snap onto a minifigure hand. The wrench is placed on the left side, which is the bottom on the top-down view of that U-clip. So the U-clip on the left side holds the wrench, and the U-clip on the right side holds the walkie-talkie. And then the last portion of step 11, I know I'm kind of breaking this up a little bit and not pulling the pieces all at once, but the last portion of step 11 is a 2x2x1 typical blue brick. And that is placed on top of those headlights and that 1x2 brick to keep them in place so they don't, fall out. Step 12 adds in one of the coolest actually portions of this vehicle that I really like. And in this case, a lot of these windows, they were used in space, but they were also used in like classic town sets as well. And what these basically refer to is they're two blue windows, 4x4x6, outward sloping, and you can see what they would mean because they slope outward versus inward. But I guess it really would depend upon which direction you're actually aiming for. But in this case, these would slope outward. And then on top of that, they come with a trans yellow glass for that window, and its size is particularly 4x4 by well, it says 4x4x3 roof, but I don't understand that pi 3 roof portion of it myself. That seems a little off. Interestingly, these windows are fairly thick. I know I had it off the screen there for a second. These windows are fairly thick for being a Lego window, and they weigh a little bit more than typical Lego like future windows that they came across with. And I think that was to prevent these from snapping as easily in these older sets. I mean, you can kind of hear that, right? You hear that clink. You can kind of, I don't know, imagine the weight on that as a result of that sound. Versus if I were to do that with a window from nowadays, they're thinner. They're a little thinner. You will not get that same clink. It'll be a lighter sounding item. But anyway, they just made these pretty thick back in the day, which is kind of neat though. And these, of course, just fit in here, snap into the uh, blue window locations. And let's see if you, well, let me take it back out so you can look at it again. If you see these little, and again, here I go doing it off the screen again. You see these little pinholes here? These little holes in the side? They are supposed to line up to this. There's a little notch here, and you kind of see it if I turn it to its side. Yeah, you see there's a little bump there? There's a little notch on either side of this window. Those are supposed to line up to those holes to allow that to snap in. So sometimes you slide it in this way and then you twist it like so to get it in. And there we are. And as you can see, that window's now in. But what's neat about it is it can move. When they made the Lego houses that had a very similar window style, basically you can think of this as just the ventilation for the houses and whatnot. But in this case, this window's placed on that window holder, and it's just on the top section for both sides. They did not place one on each side at the bottom, so it was just the top. Yeah, I know. I don't understand why they would need opening windows in space either. That I find that interesting as well. But again, I think it's because they used this um they used this oops, I snapped it back off again. They used this brick in multiple different areas. So, in this case, you just would keep them closed. Imagine keeping them closed, and you wouldn't play with them necessarily opening and closing like you would a house on, you know, in a neighborhood or something like that. But uh, that's just the way it is in this case, though. So they reuse this style brick for this particular build, and these are placed on either side of the um, like mobile base portion, if we want to call it that, that can sit on the ground and be dropped off in some location. So in this case, it can be placed. It's placed on either side of that. And then additionally, on step 12, we also have, and I got to look at this a little closer. We also have that 2x2 light gray, and in this case, I think it's again referred to as a ladder. Yeah, light gray ladder, 1x1.5 by 2x2. So that is what this is used for. In this case, it's just used as a grill on the front of the vehicle base, like a radiator almost. And then in addition to that, on step 12, we also have this 2x2 blue plate modified with, so I'm sorry, it's technically considered a blue plate modified 1x4 offset. I don't know where they came up with that name for this one. I mean, yes, the studs are offset. You can see these studs would not line up to studs here and here. They're actually right there in the middle of that piece. But I don't know if I would have called it that particular name. Either way, that is what they called it there on Bricklink. And so this piece is placed on top of this pillar and next to that ladder piece or radiator piece or whatever you want to call it, with the offset facing towards the front. That is step 12. Step 13 adds in just 3 more pieces. It looks like it adds in a 2x2 blue slope brick and 2 1x2 by 1 inverted blue slopes. The 2x2 blue slope is placed on top of that ladder, radiator, again, whatever you want to call it, to keep those 2 pieces in place. The 1x2 the 1x2 blue inverted slope is placed on either side of these 2 little pillars that hold the walkie-talkie. Actually, did I miss a piece? I did. I just realized that because these are supposed to be level. So let's back up. It looks like step 11. See, I've already missed something. Step 11, I missed these 2 pieces. 2 1x1 by 1 blue bricks, and they're actually supposed to go on top of those. I know you can't see when my hand's covering it, but they're supposed to go on top of the pillars there that hold the walkie-talkie and the wrench on either side. And then now on step 13, this is how I knew I missed something, because you can see from the picture these are supposed to be level to this slope over here. I now add in the 1x2 by 1 blue inverted slopes on either side of the pillar, like so. That is step 13. We're getting very close to the end here. Step 14. We need a cabin view before you close it up. All right, yeah, I agree. I'll move it to in front of the isometric view, or I'll twist it and turn it so you can look at the top-down view from the inside. Because yes, I see how you would miss how that would look from different angles as a result. Once I finish the roof here, so we only have 2 more steps. And in this case, it adds in step 14 adds in these 2 4x4 again blue wedges, and with one being a right, one being a left, based upon the slope. And then it also adds in these 2 light gray pieces, and I'm gonna have to look up what these are called because I'm sure these are odd as well. They are considered light gray plate modified 1x2, which makes sense. So here's the 1x2 portion of the plate. So then, considers it with a long stud holder or space wing, as they also have in parentheses. And then there is also a 1x6 blue plate for step 14. The 2 blue wings are placed, let's see, they're placed on top of here. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, I had these are placed wrong. Goodness. I'm just not doing things right today, am I? These I placed in the wrong section. As you can see, they're supposed to be one stud in. I missed that, so I'm going to fix that right now with this other one as well. Now they are one stud in. Now the wings will make more sense as they look like in step 14 from the instructions. The wings supposed to be placed on either side, and I have to be very careful here because this is not the most sturdy of builds for sure. Their design here could use a little bit more structure, I guess, but it is what it is. You just have to not apply a ton of force so these don't get, if you do that, sometimes the pieces explode everywhere. You get that sometimes. The 2 1x2 gray plates modified with the long stud holder are placed on either side of the windows, like so, and then the 1x6 blue plate is placed on the back. And now you can see, it's a lot more sturdy, than it was, obviously, now that we've got the top covered, basically. And so here's what it looks like on the inside. Again, the idea, I guess, for this particular build or this particular set is that this would be placed, as a temporary structure somewhere, and then this portion of it can go riding around or even flying around and moving around, as need be. So step 15 finishes it all up. We have these 2 blue wings, and they are, I think they're called tails. Sorry, not wings, tails. 2 blue tails, 4x1x3, so 4 by 1 width by 3 height. So we have 2 of those. And then we have 2 trans red 4 high antennas, so 4H antennas. And then the last 2 pieces are these 2 trans red 2x2 inverted dishes. And basically the tails go up here to keep the piece with the slope, or I'm sorry, the piece with the long stud extender in place. So they are placed on either side of the vehicle base there. The 2 antennas are placed actually upside down inside of the center stud here of that offset brick or plate we were dealing with earlier. And try to make them level. So that goes all the way through. You can push them all the way down if you want, but basically they show, according to the picture, them just slide in a little bit, not pushed all the way through, not halfway through, just the tips placed in that offset area. And then lastly, the 2 dishes, trans red dishes, are placed on either side of the long stud holders. And that then completes the base, the mobile base portion of this vehicle. And, again, to sum it all up, here's what this looks like in 3D. There's the pin that would snap it into place on the back of the vehicle. So this is the mobile, or this is the this is the base portion. This is the cockpit and the vehicle base. And then the idea is that, as you can see, this base gets slid here. Let me see. Here we go. Slid here and snapped into the back of that Technic brick that was on the back here of this base. And so that pin snaps into the center of that, putting all 3 pieces together. And there you are. We now have our Mobile recovery vehicle completed. And technically, I guess the last guy would be standing here in the back doing his thing. And so, there's the view from the isometric view. And I'll give it, one of the things I actually was considering building, and maybe I need to do this, is I was actually considering building my own little turntable, little Lego turntable, actually functioning with a little motor and everything. And I'd be able to power it, and it could spin this vehicle around when I'm done. Spin builds around when I'm done slowly, like they show on like car, show floors for vehicles and stuff. They stick the car on the little turntable and it spins around. Yeah, that would be fun. I think I might seriously do that because, obviously you can't get the better. The top down view is nice because you get to see it build up layer by layer, which is typically how Lego does their instructions. Is most times it's you start at the bottom and you build your way up. But then the isometric view is really what gives you the size and the dimensions and the really what this thing would look like if you were playing with it at home or building it for yourself. um and it's a little tall, so I can lift the camera up a little bit, I guess, to get the whole thing in picture. But that's basically the classic space mobile recovery vehicle. Um, Again, from 1986. It's a pretty neat build, coming from that time period. And again, I didn't know it broke into three sections. I suspected two, but I didn't know that it even broke into three sections. So that's kind of interesting. And that's not the only time Lego does those sort of things. I have actually one of my Ice Planet sets breaks up into like six different sections, which I always found neat because if you ever watch Star Trek, like The Next Generation, I always was, I grew up watching that show for sure. I always loved when the saucer separated from the base, of that uh, Enterprise. And this, as a kid, this would fit right up that alley for, getting that adventure and that those feelings and uh, play basically by doing something very similar. Okay, I'm gonna leave this over here. Well, no, actually, I'm gonna put it right here for right now because we're gonna switch to a Technic build because I'm probably not gonna have time to stream next week. Um, Actually, I'm probably gonna cut it here. Yeah, I was thinking about it. I'm looking at it now. We're already an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half in. That the stream today took me a little longer because of the trouble difficulty with the microphone I had starting off, and then I have to admit this has not been one of my best um, builds and explaining and walking through the builds as I've had previously in some of my previous ones, and part of that's just because of my not having built this set myself prior to this moment. This is the first time I've ever built this set completely. Um, so there's a little bit of a learning curve even for me. All right. Well, I guess that'll consider it, or that'll end the stream for tonight. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that we can continue this tomorrow with the Technic build, and then again, these will be posted on YouTube separately as separate builds, um, with one during this weekend and one during next weekend when I'm not available scheduled then. And that because that was the whole reason why I was wanting to do two tonight. But again, thank you for coming, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow. Bye.